So, what prompted me to work with families was really my first advocate was my mother and the work that she did to make sure that I got the kind of education that I deserved. And when I watched her fight for me and fight for all the kids that were in my school, especially kids of color, Black and brown kids that look like me, one of the things that I realized is that she was often alone in those spaces. And I wanted to create an organization where Black and brown parents, together with parents of all backgrounds, could be those advocates collectively, where they could realize they weren't alone and that there was the power in their shared voices and making change for each and every one of our kids. Right now, I think that what parents and families need most, especially given everything that's going on in the pandemic, is grace. This has been a really hard year, not just on children, but also on families. You have families that are trying to work from home, that are trying to figure out where their next meal is going to come from, where they're trying to figure out how to connect every day to multiple Zoom rooms and classrooms, where they don't have the same kind of capacity and support that they've had in years past. And I think what we need to figure out is how do we give families that grace to be able to help them navigate through the pandemic. I think we need to make sure that we're thinking about the mental health and wellness of our students, but also their families. They're all in their homes together. And so we really need to give families and students and parents all of the support that we can and the grace to help them get through this pandemic. It's about learning, but it's also about love. And I think we need to make sure that we're taking care of the whole child and the whole family as we do this work. The reason that it's really important for families to understand how their child is doing and their achievement academically in a classroom is because that's one of the things parents most care about. They're not just thinking about how their child is doing this year, but they want to make sure that each year they're learning more and more. So then they're able to go on and have really productive lives post secondary school. And that's so important for so many of our families. And they want to be able to support and help their children. And so we have to make sure as systems leaders that we're actually giving the families the information that they want in order to be able to support their children at home and in school. That means information, not just in terms of here is the grade and how your child is doing in the grading, but also what standards need to be accomplished every year and where should your child be around gaining a lot of this knowledge. And so it's really important for us in terms of helping families around their child's achievement is giving them all the information that school leaders have, that teachers have, that folks in the classroom have. Because as we've learned, the classroom has come into their homes. And so oftentimes families are doing a lot of this work themselves. And so the most important thing that we can think about is how can we give them all the data and information and understanding of how our system works, whether or not that's grading or assessments, in order to be able to support their child at home and in school. Can most do now to prepare their child for high school and beyond, knowing that that transition from middle school to high school is a really challenging one, is to understand where their children are developmentally and to understand the change that happens as young people become teenagers and as teenagers grow into young adulthood. And that's about development and that's about where our kids are socially, emotionally, not just academically. And it's so important for our families to be able to have that information about how their kids are doing, not just academically and not just how they're doing in the classroom, but also just how they're doing as people and what should be expected as a parent in order to make sure that their kids have the kind of social emotional learning that they need to grow up into really productive citizens once they get out of school. And so high school is so important is because it's a time of freedom. It's a time where kids are now managing their own schedules. And it mimics more of what you're going to have in the real world as you manage getting yourself to and from work and you're managing different kinds of interests and opportunities. That's what high school looks like. And it's very different from our earlier years in education where much of their learning is guided. They're starting to guide themselves. And so what's important is talking about the academics that students are going to need in high school, but also talking about where they are developmentally in terms of their social emotional learning and development. And I think that's just so critical and something that parents really should be given the information about as they navigate that transition from middle school to high school.